Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. Guy. As you know, I'm not here today. I just want to go over the practice quiz with you just to make sure I can kind of try to give you some advice or maybe answer some questions that you might have as we go through. Sort of kind of just walk you through all the different stuff. So let's go ahead and take a look at these. First of all, the first sort of section you can expect on your test, you're going to have to talk about parent functions. Really what you're going to be doing is you need to identify what the parent function is and then what the domain and range of the function I'm showing you is. So if there is some sort of transformation that does change that domain or range, you would need to state that. So for this one, we have a cubic function here, so it's x cubed. And then even though this one's been shifted over to the right with a cubic, it's all real numbers. So I wrote it as the interval notation, but you can write all real numbers, same thing. And that doesn't really change even though there's a transformation there. Same thing, we have our step function. It looks like it's been kind of moved down one, our step function, but still going to be all real numbers, and the integers as our y values. Okay, so this is kind of like stuff from your pop quiz. Do you know your parent functions, and then also a little bit of the hey, if it moves, does that change the domain or range? That sort of thing. The next section from your practice quiz is, again, identifying your parent function and then talking about the transformations based off of what you see in the function. So that's kind of understanding our A, H, and K and what those are doing. For number 5, this one is being moved to the left 4 and down 1. You see a plus 4 on the inside and minus 1 on the outside. For number 6, this is a 1 over x is our rational function. And that one can be a little bit tricky because we can see that 2 up top. We might be like, why is that 2 there? What's that doing? That's actually the same thing as it being multiplied by 2. So that has a stretch of 2. It's going to the right 2 and it's going up 2. A lot of 2's going on in that one. And then for number 7, we have that it is reflected or flipped. It is a stretch of 4. It is going to the left 5 and down 2, and that would be a radical function for that one. Okay, so again, identifying here's the parent function, and then what transformations are going on based off our A, H, and K. Moving on over here, for these ones, the next section is you're going to basically write me the equation based off what it says here. So hey, it's supposed to be x squared, but I want this to happen to it. So kind of knowing how to plug stuff in to make that happen. We can see that with this one going 5 to the right and down 2, because subtraction on the inside moves you to the right. And then over here, we're going 3 to the left, and it's reflected, so that minus out front, or it's flipped. That means the same thing. And then here we have a graph. We have to write the equation for that graph. Here's an absolute value. It's gone to the right 1 and down 4, so I'm showing that. And then obviously multiply by 2 because it has a stretch of 2. Basically for this one, it's kind of multi-thing. 1, do you know what your parent functions are and what they look like? And then can you do the transformations on them? Do you know how they move around based off of that? And then whether something's a function or not, right? So looking at is it a function? Is it not a function? Basically, as we said in class, what we're looking for is that plus or minus thing showing up. That's basically going to happen when you have to do roots of that aren't even. So like for this one to get y by itself, I'm doing a 4th root, but it's on x here. And so when I do that root, I'm going to get that plus or minus. And so because it's an even root that's making that plus or minus show up, it's not going to be a function. Whereas the other one, when I get y by itself, I don't get that plus or minus that shows up, so it is going to be a function. So you're kind of looking out for those even roots that make that plus or minus show up to make something not be a function. And then evaluating, plugging stuff in. Can you plug stuff into your function, plugging in different variables, expressions and stuff? That's just kind of simplifying. Can you do that? All right. Just to let you know, so tomorrow, when you have your first part of your test, this is what's going to be on the first part of these first 2 pages. This is what you can expect to see. Okay. In fact, it's basically like this with different numbers to the point where the start of the second part of your test, which you'll take the following day, will actually start with a question that's sort of like 13, kind of like here, where the next one is, all right, same deal, you're plugging stuff into this function. So very, very similar layout to what you have on this practice test. You plug in those numbers, plug in whatever, simplify, and get your answers. Finding domain, so this is kind of understanding what can cause issues with our domain. There's 2 things you're looking for: dividing by 0 or square roots of negatives. Anything that would cause that to occur, that's the things that you would say, okay, this is not part of my domain. So for example, in 15, if we look at the bottom there, what's going to cause 0, or what's going to cause us to have 0 in our denominator is both -3 and 0. That's kind of where this function is going to be divided by 0. So you can see I left those out of my domain there. Same thing with 16. -8, that's kind of where anything under -8 is where my square root would be negative, and so my domain doesn't exist there, so I left that out. And then for 17, there's the bell ringing, but for 17, everything up to 3 is going to be okay, but anything above 3, that's where we're going to start having negatives. And then you'll also see I did not include 3 in that one, specifically because we would be dividing by 0 if I put a 3 in, okay? This isn't drawn very well, but that -8 actually has a bracket next to it. I'll say that just because it doesn't look like it. That's supposed to be a bracket. This is me being sloppy. But this one, that is a parenthesis. And the reason why it's a parenthesis is because if I put a 3 in there, I divide by 0. So I kind of get both issues going on with that one, okay? Increasing, decreasing, or constant, you're going to just tell me where it's increasing, where it's decreasing, where it's constant. Again, just giving me the intervals. I don't have the y values here. I don't care about the y values, just over the domain. Where's it going up, down? We're staying the same. Evens and odds, you either have to plug in -x like these first two. Do you end up with the same thing, or do you end up with the exact opposite, or somewhere in the middle would be neither? And then you also, there's not one on here. I will maybe give you a little wink, wink hint. You may be expected to do it from a graph as well. So even though there's not one on here, for the graph, remember we talked about those types of symmetry. Is it symmetrical over the y-axis? Is it symmetrical across the origin, doing that sort of rotational symmetry? You might see a graph and have to tell me whether it's odd or even. Okay, so just a little wink, wink. You might have to know that for the second day. And then a little bit of kind of going back to something we did in the beginning chapter where we're talking about our distance formula, our understanding our distance formula, really knowing that it's a right triangle. Okay, so we can kind of see, based off the information here, we kind of can set up a right triangle, solve for that distance. I will tell you that, again, not to give you any hints, but if you watch this video to the end, I think you get a hint. On your quiz, when you take it, the one on there, be very careful about the diagram that you draw, because they're going to talk about, it's not going to be maybe as straightforward as this one, but you want to make sure that you kind of draw your diagram and think about, okay, what are the sides of my right triangle based off the information that's here? And not just trying to like add numbers together and call it a day, right? Look and think about, okay, what are my actual sides of my triangle that I'm making when this scenario is going on? Kind of a vague hint, but just something to think about when you take the one that's on your test as opposed to the one that's here. Okay, but it's a similar concept. You're going to be doing the same sort of thing. It's a little bit of a wrinkle, so think about that, okay? But that's what you can expect. So day one, again, as I said, you're going to be doing kind of the first 2 pages. So if you want to make sure you're really good on those, that's going to be day one. Day 2, you're going to be doing kind of what's on the next 2 pages. Again, all because something isn't on here. If it's something we covered, it could be on there. It could be expected. Like there could be something on max and mins. We obviously have our increasing and decreasing on here, but we also talked about max and mins. There could be a graph that's even or odd. I think that's pretty much all the stuff that's not on here. That's stuff that we covered, but just make sure that you're familiar with all that stuff that's on there. Okay. So good luck studying today. I hope it goes well, and I'll see you all when I come back.